Cool. Just if you'd like to pray with me, everyone, just as we hear from Steph and what the Lord's put on her heart. Lord, we thank you. We just thank you for the joy that is in this room. We thank you for the joy that's upon this message. And we love all that you've been doing through Steph's life. And so we look forward to this message that you've been speaking to her about. Would you open our ears and our hearts to receive all that you have for us? Amen. Noel, over to you.
Thank you. I've got a little tape mark here, so I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm doing the right thing by Harry, and I'm right on the mark. I'm ready to go. Well, good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be back up with you again. I was a kinder teacher last year, and I have to tell you that I still find it a little bizarre to have such an attentive and captive audience. So if you feel like kind of wiggling around or asking your neighbour if they'll go and dig a hole in the sandpit with you, that would be very normal for me. So as Di said, I'm really happy to be continuing our series looking at generosity. And this morning, we're going to be paying attention to some of the warnings that Jesus gives us in his teachings on money. And when we look at the Bible and what it says about money, a lot of what Jesus said are warnings. So we will be paying attention to those, but we're also hopefully going to be understanding how we can really actively pursue a lifelong practice of generosity, as we've heard the stories of in this series. So as I've been preparing for this message, I've been struck by two things, and one of them is that I was just observing that life as I know it today, it feels like greed has become quite rampant, but also it's got quite a kind of chameleon-like nature. It sort of changes and adapts and blends in. I just felt like I observed that greed as I know it, kind of modern greed, is sort of sneaky. And greed has always been the lust for more money and more things, but with the world at our fingertips and in our pockets, greed feels like more of a gradual slide down the slippery slope of consumerism. We live in an environment of 24/7 news cycles. We can purchase pretty much anything at any time and get it delivered straight to us very quickly. And we can connect at a really surface level to hundreds of people instantly too. And I'm aware that these things have their benefits, and our modern society is phenomenal in the advances in so many ways, but no doubt they also contribute to a Western experience of life that's greedy for information, greedy to have access to things quickly, and greedy for validation. And that feels like quite a sobering place to start. But the second thing that I've been struck by in preparing for this morning is that I've just found such great comfort in the ancient teachings of Jesus on greed. Ancient in the sense that they were given so very, very many years ago, long before I was anywhere here. And it might sound obvious, but they've been comforting. So as we talk about greed this morning, in the context of generosity, I hope that you too will take heart in knowing that greed is not a new symptom of humanity, and it's not a foreign aspect of our human condition to Jesus. And as he always has and always will in so many things, he's gone ahead of us. So instead of stumbling and slipping into greed, we can seek the words of Jesus and intentionally align our lives to the economy of his kingdom and pursue generosity as the antidote to greed. So as we look at some of Jesus' teachings on money, you'll notice they have a message of warning in them. But I hope that we can also notice the biblical antidote to greed, generosity. So this morning we're going to look at the invitation of Jesus to slow down and to simplify our lives in order to create margin for a life of generosity. For me, in moments, at the moment, it sometimes feels like the world is a little bit at its limit. Opening the news reminds me of many of the cracks and the crisis and the conflict. And I really feel that now, more than ever, Jesus' ancient invitation of generosity, of slowing down our lives, of seeking to simplify and find joy, is a message that's so radically needed and something that people are searching for. My experience of life is one that is bombarded by the idea of more. Greed is masked as need, and I find that I'm often sold the idea that more stuff will be the answer to a multitude of problems. I feel that our eyes and our attention are really fiercely competed for in an environment of algorithms and of advertising that's more responsive and reflexive to our lives and our habits than ever before. And brands and businesses are creative and effective in their tactics in competing for our dollars. They use greed to speak to our deepest needs. And speaking of needs, this week, as I scrolled through my email inbox, I noticed that I was the recipient of some very generous offers in my email inbox. And so I thought I would really humbly share them with you. So it's a little small, so I'm going to help you out here. This email writes of some exciting news that's just for me, not for you guys, it's just for me. I really never knew that I was so special to this brand, that they would make me an offer just like this. And you'll see in the middle there, it says that I am one of their very important curlies or VICs. This is a brand that sells hair products. I never knew that I was so important to them that they would go out of their way to make sure that they sent me a personal email just so I didn't miss out on this special event. Wow. I wish you guys would have got this too. Let's have a look at this one. It was a good week for me in my emails. This one, I'm so glad that I've got this brand that helps me to remember to take care of myself and look after myself. Look, it says that they know how hard I've been working, and they've been so generous to give me a special treat to help me take care of myself. I don't know if you noticed, but it's a $50 voucher. How generous is that? And when I thought about it, I really think they're right. I should spoil myself. I definitely do deserve it. I mean, I know it says I have to spend $250 to be able to use my voucher, but I really think they're right. It's been a big week, so I might treat myself and use this one. I think buying something from them will definitely fill up my cup in a really lasting way. That'll be great. But that wasn't the only one. Look, there's another one. I couldn't not share this one with you guys. It was beyond generous. Not only did this brand acknowledge the cognitive load that I didn't even know I'd been carrying in trying to decide which one of their items to purchase. I just zoomed in on the subject heading there for you so you could see. They also generously offered to give me 20% off when I purchased 2 items. Notice the way that these brands masked greed with generosity. And when I scrolled through my email inbox, this was just a small sample of a lot of emails. A $50 voucher just for you, but you have to spend $250. Can't decide which item to buy? Why not buy both? We'll discount it for you, don't worry. Messages such as these bombard us constantly. As each of these interactions, hello, hi. As each of these interactions, we're encouraged and persuaded and incentivized to buy into the Western narrative of more, and greed is normalized. I'm receiving emails such as these because they're effective. They feed into our need to be wanted. Remember, I'm a very important curly. The need to be seen, treat yourself, spoil yourself, and the lie that more is better. Can't decide, buy 2 instead of 1. I just also want you to know that I'm getting these emails because I have bought from these brands in the past. So take what I say with a grain of salt. With a kingdom outlook, we know that the Father is our provider. We know that he knows us more deeply and more intimately than we know ourselves, that he loves and values and wants us more than anything in or of this world. But with the sheer avalanche of competing voices, this worldview is just chipped away at again and again through greed. And this is not a 2024 phenomenon either. Maybe the way that we receive it is, but long before the era of digital manipulation, the human heart has long been prone to believing the myth of more, the lie that if we just had a little bit more, we'd be happy. But the truth is, as it has been for hundreds of years, no matter how much we get, it's never enough if it's not from the kingdom. The writers of Ecclesiastes said this thousands of years ago: those who love money never have enough. Those who love wealth are never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. That's the nature of greed. The more we want, the more we get. We think that money will make us happy, but not only does it not make us happy, it often makes us less happy, more anxious, distracted, discontent, and lonely. In the West, we live in the most affluent generation in history. We have ample access to resources and information, and yet so many of us are racked by fear, by worry, greed, unsatisfied desire, and many again are living a life of struggle, of not having enough. Considering all of this, it's no surprise, and again it's somewhat comforting, that much of Jesus' teachings on money are warnings about the danger of it. So let's look at Luke 12:15. I'm managing both my clicker and my microphone with my bionic hand here. Jesus says, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed." Greed is the insatiable desire for more things than we have and more things than we need. And we're all vulnerable to some version of greed. It might look like living a life of extravagant wealth, comfort and luxury, but it may also look like an insatiable need for validation, for instant gratification, social status or power. Hence Jesus' line, "Watch out," or in the Message translation, "Take care." But why do we need to watch out and take care? Why is greed so bad and dangerous? The next line of Luke is fairly clear. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. According to Jesus, an abundance of possessions is just not where the good life is to be found. There's more warnings if we turn to the words of Jesus in Mark 4. "Still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful." Jesus doesn't say here that wealth is evil. He says it is deceitful. This is the same flavour as the emails I shared earlier, which encouraged me to lean into my desire for more things and spend beyond what I need in the hope that I'll get happiness, contentment, and identity. But Jesus' warnings about wealth go beyond avoiding its empty promises. He says that the allure of wealth and possessions keep us from the good life of generosity. That the biggest obstacle to experiencing God's heavenly life and his presence is our stuff. Jesus says in Matthew, no, I didn't put that one in. Harry, can you go back for me? Thank you. In Matthew 19:23, do you have any idea how difficult it is for the rich to enter God's kingdom? Let me tell you, it's easier to gallop a camel through a needle's eye than for the rich to enter God's kingdom. This idea of the warning of financial success and the impact on our spiritual life is one that's rarely heard in our culture, and it's a really challenging one. We live in one of the most greedy, materialistic cultures in history, and so perhaps we're somewhat ignorant of the way that greed has infiltrated into our cultural norm. We live in a time where virtually any material thing we want, it's impossible to get, all for a price. The temptation to find our satisfaction through the accumulation of money and possessions is a common cultural narrative. However, and here comes the good news, there's a practice from the way of Jesus that sets our heart free from greed and forms us into people who are deeply happy and at peace with what we have. And I'm guessing you know where this is going, but the practice of generosity. The Father, in his transforming way, has the ultimate act of reversal for greed. There's a silver bullet, it's generosity. So yes, it's true that the more we get, the more we want, but the inverse is also true. The more we give, the more happy and at peace we become, as we've heard through our Kingdom Generosity series. The Bible frames this kind of inner satisfaction as contentment. If greed is being unsatisfied and racked by desire for more, then contentment is the opposite. It's being deeply happy with and grateful for what you have. It's being free of the desire for more. So let's move our conversation away from greed to the answer found in the way of Jesus, contentment, by looking at 1 Timothy 6, starting at verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, or the Message version, which I really liked. A devout life does bring wealth, but it's the rich simplicity of being yourself before God. Here in Timothy, Paul doesn't speak of true wealth as occurring in a measure of things. It's being happy in God and content with what you have. I find this such a beautifully simple and relieving truth. It's not striving through accumulation of material things that brings us happiness. There's incomparable riches, incomparable joy in being ourselves before God. Reading on from verse 7, we brought nothing into this world. We can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. As I was preparing, one commentary pointed out that this verse, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, is often misquoted to saying that a love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. But that's not what 1 Timothy says. It's the evil underneath so many of the evils in our souls and in our society. And the emails that I shared at the beginning are evidence of this. They're telling me that the way to care for myself, the way to find importance and find validation is through spending money. And though the Bible warns us of the dangers of money, it's not automatically evil. Paul warns us here that it's the love of money that produces the pitfall. Money is powerful, and when stewarded with care, is able to do great good. In our series, looking at Kingdom Generosity, we've heard stories of just this, of faithful stewarding of money to bless people generously. This is also a practice that I know is alive and well within the DNA of YVV, where money and resources have been faithfully given to the work of Kingdom through the ministry of YVV. But nevertheless, Paul's warning paints a sorry picture for those who are motivated by a love for money. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Or the Message version says that they live to regret it bitterly ever after. It's clear in 1 Timothy that Paul warns of the dangers of money and of greed, but let's also remember the solution that he offers: contentment. Randy Alcorn considers contentment like this: being satisfied in whose you are, who you are, and what you have. Those who love and serve Jesus can be truly content, and those who love and serve money can never be. Contentment is realizing that you have enough, and beyond that, to be happy with what you have. And we can work towards contentment through the practice of generosity. We can think of generosity, I'm clicking too much, as twofold. One aspect of generosity is giving. We know that giving is God's antidote to greed. By giving away our resources, which are not actually our resources in the first place, we invite kingdom-level joy, which supersedes greed every day of the week. Luke 11:39 tells us that giving generously is the remedy to greed. I'm skipping ahead, I think it's to verse 41 here, but Luke says, "Didn't the one who made the outside also make the inside? Turn both your pockets and your hearts inside out and give generously to the poor. Then your lives will be clean, not just your dishes." The other side of generosity is to simplify our life, to edit it down to the essential of what really matters, and both aspects of generosity are important. You may have heard this quote before, that there are two ways to get enough. One is to continue to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. The intentional and disciplined pursuit of less has come to be called simplicity in a kingdom context, or perhaps you've heard minimalism in more secular terms. Importantly, simplicity is not the same thing as poverty. It's not about having nothing, but rather living with less. Simplicity is about limiting the number of our possessions, our expenses, our activities, and our social commitments to a level where we have freedom to live joyfully and generously in the kingdom with Jesus. This concept of simplicity and contentment comes into clarity when we consider how we can create space in our life to be generous. To live a generous life, you need margin to be able to give from, and the capacity to give, or margin, can be created through simplifying and seeking contentment in what we have. A practice of simplicity in our life only makes sense within a worldview of Jesus, where there is more joy in giving than in receiving, and therefore pursuing a life that's postured in a state of readiness to give is meaningful. It has a life-giving priority. As we consider simplicity and contentment, I remember the words of Jesus in Luke 12. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That's contentment. That's what simplicity is. If we are to live an authentic, generous life, modelled on the way of Jesus, we need to prayerfully examine our lives and create space financially, relationally, and in our time to partner with the moving of God's generous Spirit. Making margin and capacity for generosity is to adopt and foster a lifelong practice and discipline of being generous. Simplifying our lives to make space for opportunities to be generous doesn't mean we'll be lacking, though. Paul says in 1 Timothy 6, verse 8, that if we have food and clothing, we will be content. What more could we want? The call of Jesus to be content is for all of us, no matter how vast or beginning our life and legacy of generosity is. A final verse on contentment from Hebrews 13, verse 5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Or the Message version really conveys the freedom that is available when we pursue a life of generosity and contentment. Don't be obsessed with getting more material things. Be relaxed with what you have. Isn't that the greatest balm for the state of our world in 2024? To be relaxed with what you have, to be content with what you have. Jesus' way of living a life that is generous, that has a foundation of deep-rooted contentment in who you are and what you have, and that actively seeks to make space to be generous, is one that feels seriously countercultural. I can imagine the relief, the freedom and the joy that encountering kingdom generosity and kingdom contentment would bring to someone whose only narrative, whose only worldview is one that more money, more things and more status would make them happier and more satisfied. Maybe my message this morning of generosity and contentment and simplicity as the antidote to greed is not news to you, that you know the joy of living out the lifelong discipline of generosity. Let me encourage you in saying that your life, lived in likeness to the generous way of Jesus, has and will continue to have great impact on those you encounter, where they catch a glimpse of the kingdom when you share yourself, your time and your resources as the Father calls you to do. Think of your life of generosity as being a living example of an alternative way to live, an example of the joy and of contentment, simplicity and freedom that accompanies these. This is the Jesus way, not riches or poverty, but freedom, contentment and generosity. The emails that I shared this morning are trying to convince me that I can satisfy my desires, that I can find happiness, find my identity, my safety and my peace through more money. And to an extent, they're right. Buying both the bag and the pair of shoes at 20% off would make me feel happy. Buying more curly hair gel would give me very fantastic curls and I'd feel unstoppable. And spoiling myself with $250 worth of new clothes would feel great, it would, but only for a while. All of that would fade away and crumble. Lasting and deep in your spirit level happiness, identity, self-worth, safety, all of these things are found in God. And that's enough. That's contentment. Hebrews goes on to say, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. There's such good news there. We already have all we need to access the kingdom. God's our provider. And as Hebrews said, he's never going to leave us or forsake us. So right here, right now, we have everything we need to live a happy life in God. So we're coming into land. But before we finish, we're going to spend a couple of minutes just reflecting on generosity, on contentment, on simplicity. I hope you sat on a little rectangle of paper. And I'm just going to get Shelley and Steve are going to hand around some pens. I'm going to invite Helen and Matt up just to play some music quietly in the background. And for the next few minutes, there's just a few questions on the screen that might prompt your thinking about simplicity and about contentment. I'm aware that these things, simplicity, contentment and generosity, take the shape of who we are individually. And so I wanted to make space for you this morning to reflect on what these things might look like for you. My version of contentment doesn't look the same as your version of contentment. So we'll just have a couple minutes to respond, and then I'll be back. As I was thinking about this morning, I also just felt like recognizing that for some of us, there may be areas in our life where we're really seeking provision. And as I was talking about contentment, I felt like the Father was also saying, Yes, we can be content with what we have, but that doesn't mean that He's not willing and wanting to provide for us in the areas that we need. So if there's something where you're really seeking the provision of the Father, the prayer team would love to pray with you this morning. But before we move, I'm just going to pray to close. Father God, we ask that you would bless us abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, we may have all that we need. Father, would you freely scatter your gifts to the poor through us? May God, who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, also supply and increase your store of seed and enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. May you be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and may your generosity result in thanksgiving to God.